Oh, I forgot. Oh, I didn't wave. Oh, well, that was good enough. Hi, guys, and welcome to another video. Another dungeon video. Today, we're still in the Far Shiver Peaks for our dungeons at the moment. I think we're coming up onto one of the last ones, though. We're going to be doing Raven's Point. Well, at the end, I suppose there are a couple more, but we're going to be doing Raven's Point. Now, this dungeon is going to be another one very similar to the Cathedral of Flames that we did, where it's essentially just another run through a dungeon we've seen before. Not only is it the same assets as many dungeons use, but it's actually the exact same layout as what we saw when we went and did A Gate Too Far, if you remember that, during the main storyline. So to start that off, we're going to have to walk through Varahar Fells and go just to A Gate Too Far, and we'll see that someone's got a quest for us up there. Before we do that, however, I'm going to kick off this video by reading our dungeon guide about the Darkrim Delves. Which part 2 I've not actually uploaded yet, sorry about that, but will be going up this evening. So, not the Darkrim Delve, sorry, the Sepulchre of Dragomar. And somebody actually said I was pronouncing that right, I'm super happy about that. So, the Sepulchre of Dragomar, they don't give you much information here, but I suppose it's okay, considering the fact that there was so much lore out the front of that dungeon. But it says, Remlock, a lone dwarven outrunner, waited near the entrance to a hidden sepulchre tucked away in the northern mountains. He wished to procure the Anvil of Dragomar, a dwarven artifact from a bygone age. Bygone age, see, that's so cool. This is obviously the age of Tyrian history where the Massart and the Seers and the Char and they were all about. It's so cool. I hope eventually they make a game or like a spin-off game. I wouldn't even care if it was a different genre to MMO. I really wouldn't. Or at least a book about that age. I love it when games with really good established fantasy worlds do stuff like that. The Anvil was guarded by ancient traps and an ice elemental of immense size and power. Having this charismatic dwarf on our side could only help our cause. So we braved the pitfalls and escorted him to the sepulchre. This is so cool. I love that. The final boss there as well. It's just a giant elemental. The elementals barely come into the story. They're just like generic monsters, but at least here, sort of a giant one that actually comes forward a little bit. So yeah, that was the Sepulchre of Dragomar. We will get the quest and find out exactly why we're doing this next dungeon when we're outside there. So I'm going to make sure everybody's okay, and I'll see you guys. I'm going to cut it until we're along the outside. I mean, we've seen plenty of Varahar Fells, so we'll be just out here where we defended with the Norn against the Destroyers during the main storyline. So I'll see you guys in a second. Okay, so here we are. As you can see, this was Olafstead here, and we just walked on through. The actual entrance to the dungeon, and I've pointed this out before, is actually a little bit inside a real cave in the actual outside explorable area. It's really, really interesting here. But on the very, very outside here, we'll find Olrun Olaf.here. And she will give us an actual dungeon quest. If you remember, we spoke to her before. She actually fell in love with us before. She's probably not too happy that we're here. But she says, "Hail, friend. King Jarlath sent a unit of dwarves to clear the destroyers out of Raven's Point." So remember, in the main storyline, it was established that there was a destroyer hive down here, which we went into. But they've run into some trouble, apparently. Their engineer, an annoying little Asura named Zap, flew out of the caverns like a bat out of Grenth's Hall, screaming about how some Captain Sargon's unit was under siege by destroyers. I knew sending little ones in to do big Norn work was no better than sending cows to slaughter, but dwarves can be quite stubborn. I love it. Dwarves and Asura, to be fair, they are the two small races. That's so cool. I can't leave my post, and my father is not battle ready at the moment. Could you lead Zap back to his unit, kill the destroyers, and rescue Captain Sergen's unit? Why is he not battle ready? Was it established like that he'd had an injury or something? I don't think so. Remember in Destruction's Depths, he was there. He was perfectly fine. Could you lead Zap back to his unit, kill the destroyers, and rescue Captain Sargon's unit? The engineer is waiting just inside Raven's Point. See, there were engineers in Guild Wars 1. It makes sense that they're profession in Guild Wars 2. Dead destroyers, good. Cows to slaughter, bad. Got it. Why do I get the feeling I'm the cow? Brilliant. Let's get going. Okay, so, once again, yes, this is going to be another race run. So when we actually get outside the portal, I'll arrange with the other team so that we start our race. And hopefully we'll win this time, because we absolutely got devastated last time. Good morning, everybody. This is the post-commentary now. Basically, the other team for the race took quite a while at Olafstead to get ready. So we were hanging around the portal for ages, so I decided to just start the post-commentary now and cut out all the boring stuff. So yeah, this is the little cave just before we get into the dungeon. And in the original commentary I did here, I actually mentioned, and I'll mention it again because I think it's really cool, just how amazing it looks around this corner here on the right. I also said I don't know whether it's easier to go around on the right-hand side here or on the left. If you can see on my compass that there's like a choice of which way to go. I showed you on the left before though in the Let's Play, so you know what? In the interest of seeing new stuff, then I suppose we can see the right. But yeah, look at this chamber here after these frozen elementals are dead. It looks absolutely fantastic. It's so cool. So So yeah, I've managed to edit the whole dungeon together. This one's going to be about 2 videos again. I think that's what I'd like to stick to, actually, really. I'd like to stick to having 2 videos per dungeon. That way it just keeps it a little bit more interesting. I mean, as soon as you get 3 parts, I mean, you'll probably have people watch the first one and be like, okay, that's interesting. And then maybe the last one, because obviously there's the end of the dungeon and continuing whatever I've been saying. But, you know, the middle one tends to always get a little bit screwed over. So, and there's no really long dungeons to come after this, except for, like, the last one, which is also a level 5 dungeon. So and there might be a couple of other level 5 dungeons, but I don't actually remember how difficult or how long they really are. But yeah, this chamber here, as you can see, here's Engineer Zap. I seem to remember in the Let's Play, didn't we speak to him and he had stuff to say? Because I remember like going up to the bounty giver and being like, oh, and I thought he was the bounty giver. But then he didn't. Did he just tell us to go speak to Olaf's daughter, maybe? I can't remember. I'm sure he said something. But yeah, I mean, in any case, he doesn't say anything here. He's the guy that ran out. He'll be going through the dungeon with us, and we can actually go on into Raven's Point. So I mentioned earlier in the video that actually this is going to be sort of all reused assets. Well, they were quite interesting actually. When you come to Raven's Point for the mission, they actually kind of skip you halfway through the first floor. It's quite cool. So basically what you'll see here is we actually get a bit further to walk on the first floor. You can obviously see some of these true giant bones around here, and you get a fair few more extra chambers, which is quite cool. And I'll be honest straight away, I'd completely forgotten what this dungeon actually entailed. I say in the chat like halfway through. Do you remember when we come into this dungeon the first time during the main storyline, and there's that big chamber where you have to defend to get sort of earn the favour of the Raven Spirit and sort of cleanse the shrine? You remember that? Well, there, when we get to that point in the dungeon, I say in the chat, oh, I just realised there's no dungeons that have a sort of a defending counter, you know, like a King of the Hill, like you've got to defend something while waves of enemies attack you. And it turns out, actually, that we get to the end, and as soon as I reach the 3rd floor, I remember that actually this dungeon, the boss encounter in this dungeon is actually like a huge defence mission. It's really cool. I think it's the only one that does it, but it's pretty awesome. But yeah, so you're actually going to be seeing some new stuff on this first floor, and if you remember, on the 2nd floor as well, that was the floor that I said you can skip by, like, you can literally do no fighting on that floor. During the Let's Play I actually had to fight some stuff. It didn't quite work out, but it is generally very easy to go through the 2nd floor in the mission without fighting anything. However, when you do it here in the dungeon, it turns out it's actually a lot more complicated than that. The original door you go through during the mission is now locked. You go off on this huge kind of adventure to go off, get a key. It's pretty cool. I mean, I'm enjoying the dungeons a whole lot more than I honestly thought I would. And that's not to say that I don't like the dungeons or I didn't like the dungeons when I originally did them. I think it's just that players, like, and this is true for me, it really is, players tend to just come to these dungeons and they don't really care about the dungeons. They just want to go through and just do it for their title. I mean, and then they complete it once and then they complete it again in hard mode, and I guess it just feels a little bit like a chore. And you know, I don't know, I'm enjoying it a lot more now that, and this is going to sound weird, but now that I don't have to come here, so to speak, and I'm just sort of remembering and taking in a whole lot more of the stuff, you know, like what we're doing here with the flame braziers and sort of opening the doors, and you saw that there were 2 doors that we could open, and there were all these different choices of which way to go. It's just generally really cool, and I've been enjoying the dungeons a lot more than I thought I would. I mean, I guess I just didn't think about them that much when I first played through all of them. But yeah, anyway, so what about lore for this video? Well, we were in February 2011 before, and it had 2 race weeks there. If you remember, we had the Human Week, which was followed about a fortnight later by the Norn Week, and we've looked at pretty much all the cool lore that's there. And then, so I've clicked here on to March 2011, and there's a fair few things here in March. They talked about, this was when the thief was revealed. So, you know, this is all stuff I was doing. I remember so clearly when the Guardian was revealed, exactly where I was in factions, in Carning Center. So it's quite cool to actually come back here and think, oh, what was I doing in the Let's Play at the time? There's some kind of cool stuff, but the best lore article here is one called Go Forth and Multiply, and this is quite cool because we haven't done. So one race that basically they do race weeks where they've released lore, but they also do a single article on a specific minor race, like a non-playable race, and they do these things quite often. And we've seen the Kodan. That's the only one we've seen so far. The next one is the Hylek. Okay, so the Hylek I've talked quite a lot about, a little bit more in Nightfall than in Eye of the North, admittedly, but I have talked about these guys. So basically we have 2 races in Guild Wars 1. Okay. We've got the Hecate, who we found in Nightfall, and these were toad people, basically. They had their beastmasters. I think they had alligator pets, didn't they? Found them in a lot of places around Corner, all sorts of different places. You found the Hecate. These were very, very primitive toad people. Then in Eye of the North, we found the Hylek, who were a slightly different race as far as we could see. They're more frog people, basically. And these guys were also beastmasters. They had all kinds of different tribes. All of their tribes were quite Aztec names, like the Napui and stuff like this. So they were all quite interesting, and we found those in a lot of the Tarnished Coast areas. No real lore past that was written about the Hylek, though. Come Guild Wars 2, obviously, things have changed, and the Hylek have really been fleshed out. Basically, what we're going to learn about in this blog post is that the Hecate, the original guys from Nightfall, we find out that the Hylek basically evolved from the Hecate. So you might say, well, why do the Hecate still exist? Well, that does work, because if you think about, like, humans, and then there were obviously primates still in the world, it's kind of similar to that. And obviously, in Tyria, there are no Hecate. So in Guild Wars 2, at launch, we're going to be dealing with the Hylek, who actually end up developing quite a distinct culture. You'll remember, actually, when I did that episode after Gamescom had come out this year and there was all that awesome stuff and we were in Sparkfly Swamp, we were doing quests to do with the Hylek, and if you remember, they had their own little villages in their swamp and their little houses and all kinds of interesting little things, but there was just not much lore written to finding exactly what they were doing in those places. Well, now it's pretty cool because we learn a lot more. So this is the blog post I'm going to be doing today. It was written by Eric Flanham. It was published on March 23rd, 2011, and yeah, it's called Go Forth and Multiply the Hylek. So we get a nice little picture of some huts, some quite cool looking huts. I suppose these are obviously Hylek things. There'll be an image up on the screen. And we get our first paragraph. Prolific and belligerent, Hylek are frog-like creatures that thrive in all types of water but prefer to live in swampy areas. No matter where they claim their territory, Hylek spawn in alarming quantities. Once reclusive and xenophobic, Hylek can now be found farther and farther away from their spawning grounds. From the moment they're born, Hylek find themselves in a fierce competition with their brethren for food and shelter. Those who survive grow more aggressive as their bodies develop the toxins that they use to hunt their prey, protect their villages, and strike down their rivals. They are resourceful survivors, fierce warriors, and masters of poison. They are the Hylek. So, one thing, before this came out, okay, the engineer hadn't been announced. ArenaNet were quite interesting with their profession reveals in that we got to a point where we knew that there was one returning profession coming back, and there was all which we all basically knew. Okay, there were some people who stood up against it, but they were wrong. We all knew basically that the Mesmer was going to be one of them, and the last one, nobody really knew what was going to be happening there. That was really, arguably, the mystery class. But what ArenaNet ended up doing, actually, and this may have been because simply that the Mesmer wasn't ready, which is what they'll claim, but it may have also been because the engineer, this other mysterious one, they could have released the Mesmer first, and then the engineer would have been last, right? And that would have been really nobody would have known anything really on what to go on, which would have been more interesting. But instead, they chose to release the engineer first. Some people say it's because that was quite a controversial profession, and people didn't like how there were mines with LED lights on and all that kind of stuff. But at the time that this article came out, we had no idea what the engineer was going to be, and we didn't know. And in a way, I guess, you know, it gets an elixir gun, so there is alchemist in there. But this was what a lot of people were reading and looking at and saying, how does all this stuff, because we're going to learn a lot about how the Hylek sell and trade poisons and stuff like this. They were wondering if somehow this had some relevance to one of these last mysterious professions, which is quite cool. So do try and bear that in mind and think about what we were all kind of going on. So they're going to talk a lot about these poisons. So yeah, that's the Hylek. They're very, you know, they're amphibians. It's quite simple, really. I mean, there's thousands and thousands of tadpoles, and only a few of them will get through and all that jazz. So we get a little paragraph here, which is a quote from a journal from an Asuran merchant named Flubbed, okay, and this was published posthumously. So this excerpt from the journal says, "Tech was the first to die. 2 days in doing it, fevered and rambling all the while. He'd taken only a single wound from the frogman's spear. I've collected a small sample of poison drawn from the wound, which is useful, but we should never have trusted the Duratal." So that's how I pronounce that name. I'm probably saying it wrong, but that's not a word I use very often. So I'm not sure how many other sort of sections from this journal we're going to get. I'm just scrolling down. Oh, that's the only one we get. So this is something quite cool as well. I'd love to have actual journals that you can find in-game. They have announced that there are going to be in-game books, right? Which is something that should really excite me. And it does, I guess, but I don't know why. I just can't imagine that ArenaNet are gonna put enough books in there to be really, really interesting. I mean, what I'm doing at the moment, I'm actually, this is just a complete aside to this, I'm writing basically out something. I'm hoping to do like a dynamic events video coming up at some point in the next fortnight or so. But I've been talking a lot in that about how dynamic events really detract from how well they can write the lore, basically, because there's going to be a lot less text, a lot less emphasis on speaking to NPCs and stuff. But basically, in-game books could be a really, really good way to flesh out the lore and sort of grab some of that back. So I'd love in-game books. I'd love to be able to read journals like this. But I don't know, I don't find myself thinking about it that much, and I wonder if it's just because I don't trust that they'll be that good. In any case, so the next paragraph says, the Hylek are the frog people of Tyria. Once the name of a specific tribe, it is now common parlance to call all frog people Hylek. Even the frog people themselves have adopted the name Hylek for their race, though they also keep individual tribe names to distinguish themselves from one another. So yeah, these guys are very, very tribal. With the warming of the they've got a brilliant culture to do with the sun as well, as we'll see. With the warming of the Shiver Peaks, large portions of the southern shore from the boundaries of Kryta to the edge of Ore have become swamps and bayous, prime Hylek territory. So these are like the steam spur mountains as far as I can see. You actually see on the world map, you remember like sort of that river that kind of cuts down, it's what makes Ore a peninsula instead of sort of directly connecting into the Shiver Peaks, you know, that whole bit there. And do you remember sort of to the right of that, just under Ascalon but above the Crystal Desert, it's all quite green. I can quite imagine that if things did heat up, that could very easily become a very swampy area. Especially when you consider Palawa, and we've not gone into this very much on my channel yet, but Palawa Joko damming the Ellen River, which then floods the Crystal Desert and could potentially sort of open up more avenues for that area to become a bit more fertile. So it's pretty cool. And because the Crystal Desert was only created because of Abaddon, who's now gone, so his power should be seeping away and sort of restoring that land, which could be quite interesting. Anyway, sorry, that's a little bit off topic. The Hylek have expanded into these areas and flourished. As their numbers have grown, they've taken over more land, continuing to spread. The areas the Hylek have chosen to settle are not without all their dangers. Kraits, slavers, corsairs, ravenous drakes, and the minions of Zaitan all routinely threaten Hylek settlements. And in fact, that reminds me, reading that with the minions of Zaitan, we've seen some of this area. We've seen the new Sparkfly Swamp, of course, in one of the latest demos, which is quite cool. And that was very much Hylek territory based. I actually played there, but I didn't really see or interact with many Hylek. It's a bit of a shame. If I remember rightly, you start with some Hylek around, and there are some events going on. But I'll tell you what, when you get to play the demo, you really can't appreciate it very much because it's all just a mad rush to learn everything you possibly can. It's pretty cool. So, despite all of these outside dangers, perhaps the biggest threat to any Hylek tribe is when a rival tribe moves into their territory. Such an incursion often leads to all-out war until one tribe wipes the other from existence. Even with all these troubles, the Hylek are expanding during a time in which most races are struggling for survival. I think we can just attribute that to how quickly they can breed and sort of how many offspring a single Hylek can have. We get a nice picture of a very angry-looking Hylek there.